Entering the atmosphere in T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, back on Omega Metroid, joined by my friend and yours, Doominal Crossing. It's been a minute since we recorded a live episode of this podcast, and in fact, I wasn't even going to be on the show this week, but here we are. We're recording late, but we figured better late than never. So we're going to get you that new episode. We had a little bit of technical difficulties yesterday. So yeah, I'm here, and Doom's here, and that's the silver lining about the whole thing. What's going on, Doom? How are you?
Pretty good. By technical difficulties, he means it's my fault, of course. So my apologies. My apologies, Andy. I don't know what was going on with my OBS, so I'm definitely happy that you're able to swoop in and save this here. But yeah, I've been doing great. It feels like this marathon was an eternity ago, and yet other aspects of 2025, like the Switch reveal, like I feel like that just kind of came and went. We're less than a month away from the big day that we're all dying to see.
The next day we see Metroid Prime 4.
I was about to say the full Heisenberg quote, but they're probably not podcast appropriate.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, it really does feel like the marathon was forever ago, and it really wasn't. Like, and I was totally wiped after the marathon. Like, I didn't want to do it. I took a couple weeks off every podcast. I was just like, it took me a while to like readjust back, which is so funny because it was only 5 days, but it really is just like it's a lot that you pour into for an event, and you know what? We should actually start off just by thanking everybody that made that event such an incredible success. It was a success beyond my wildest dreams. We raised triple our goal for the Trevor Project, which was amazing. Everybody showed up. We had a fun chat the whole time. We had people engaged. I thought we had really fun segments. We had a few technical snafus here and there, but nothing like earth-shatteringly terrible, I don't think. And yeah, like it was everything that I hoped for and more. So thank you to everybody that tuned in and made that such a success.
Yeah. Apologies to you folks if you're tired of us thanking you all the time, but it's true. Like, from the bottom of our hearts. First off, the incredible staff that helped us throughout the event. Like, I mean, there's no way that this was a 1-man, a 2-man, or even a 3-man job. Like, this truly was a team effort, and each and every one of you contributed. And even amongst that, like, all of that effort that we put in, it means nothing if, our community doesn't show up. And my God, did you all show up? And I mean, we're humbled by it. And so, like, we seriously cannot thank you enough.
Yep.
For helping contribute to something that's, at the end of the day, way more important than our favorite video games that we love to talk about.
Yeah. It was an amazing experience, like literally from setting it up to planning to execution to community to the guests that we invited to the friends that we kind of made along the way. A lot of the people that were in the chat are now getting involved with Omega Metroid, so that's really cool. So yeah, just a big thank you to everybody, and we hope that you've enjoyed the couple segments that we had. The interview with Milton, our trivia segment, which Doom just laid the smack down in that segment on. So a lot of those were re-uploaded while we were kind of recovering. We've been off so long. I've been growing a beard. I mean, that's how long we've been off after this. Now I do have one piece of business from the marathon to take care of here. As promised, I was trying to sell some Omega Metroid Pride t-shirts, but we didn't quite get there for various reasons that I'm sure everybody can guess. But I did have some made, and I am a man of my word, and I'm going to give one away right here, right now. So this is what I promised. That everybody that donated $5 would be entered to win a t-shirt. Okay? And if you donated $10, you'd be entered to win twice, 15, 3 times, etc., etc. I had the lovely Mrs. Spiteri go ahead and get every single one of our... There's like 400 donations, by the way, individual donations, so it's just a crazy amount. And I tasked her with finding out who is going to win the shirt, and we have a winner, and that winner, his name is Tanner. That was all that was on the donation. So Tanner, I think you put in your donation note that you listen to the show, that you watch the show. Hit me up. Either slide into my DMs on Blue Sky, on Discord. Give me your shipping information. We'll talk about what kind of shirt size, all that kind of stuff you want, and we'll get that over to you. So congrats on winning, Tanner. Good job.
Yeah, congratulations, Tanner. Also, I have to say, when you mentioned that you were growing out your beard, the first thing that came to my mind was punish Spiteri.
Yeah, maybe. I kind of get to that point where like I have this little thing on my lip, and I'm like, God, I hate looking at that. Like, do I shave it? Do I just go ahead with it? Like, what do I do?
Or excuse me, starring Punish Spiteri. My bad.
Well, yeah, yes. Not a bad comparison either. So maybe I'll keep growing it. But we are, in fact, back, and we are on the road to the Switch 2, and we've got a whole bevy of shows lined up here as we barrel towards our ultimate goal, which for now is going to be the 2nd of April, which I do believe we're going to confirm here. I think we're doing a Zelda Cast Omega Metroid live stream of that, so it's going to be you, me, Al. We're going to see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to wake up bright and early, including myself, all the way on the West Coast. That's just what we're doing for the Switch 2.
Just a
that's
horrific
not going to be
start
fun.
time, by the way. Like,
yeah.
oh.
Yeah, gotta love those worldwide accommodating times. But
Yes.
it's worth it for the Switch 2, because I've been ready for this thing for a while now.
Indeed. I am ready as well.
Yeah.
You know
what else I'm ready for? I was about to say, you know what else I'm ready though for, Andy, is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4, baby. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. I gotta be honest with you. I fell off Tony Hawk after probably number 2, but honestly more so after number 1. I did see that, and I'm happy for everybody out there that's excited about the remasters. I feel like those were inevitably gonna come. You know what I did?
What did you do?
After we played Super Smash Bros. For the marathon, I was like, man, there's been a lot of DLC. There's been a lot of stuff that's released. I used to have every spirit, and I don't have all the spirits anymore. I spent like the last week playing Smash Bros. And getting all of the spirits in that game. I have like all 1,500 or whatever it is now. It's just like an insane
nice.
amount.
Yeah, that I made sure to keep my 100% collection up, because I remember one time I missed one of them. I think it was like the Peachette spirit or something like that, and it was so difficult for me to collect it because it would just never pop up for me, and because for those who don't know how the spirits work, they kind of just pop up randomly. Like, I want to say like 10 at a time, and some of the higher tier spirits only get like dedicated slots for those. And like, I was trying for months to get this one to pop up, and it just wouldn't. And after I did that, I'm like, okay, never doing that again. We're going to make sure that we get all of these for that week-long event when they're easy to get. I don't want to ever have to do that again.
I had one that was giving me troubles for like a week. It was like Cat Mario or something like that from Bowser's Fury. And I finally got it the other day, and I was like, all right, I probably will never do this again, but I had the itch, so I was like, okay, this is the last time. But yeah, so Tony Hawk coming out, a little Super Smash Bros. Action. I even finished up a nice little game, which I'm sure we'll cover on Inspired by Metroid at some point, over the next couple months as well. So yeah, been recharging the old battery, and by God, I'm ready to talk some dang Metroid here.
Well, say the Tony Hawk stuff. Like, I know Tony Hawk and a Metroid podcast, but like, they didn't have to do anything to win me over. They just had to be like, "Hey, Tony Hawk 3+4," and I would have been like, "Here's my money." But then they went, "Oh, how about that deluxe upgrade, Doom fan? How about we throw some Doom Slayer? How about we throw some Revenant in there? How about we throw some actual Doom music into the package?" And it's like, my God, I feel like I'm being personally catered to.
Hold on, what? What do you mean?
Wait, you don't know about that?
No, I guess I don't.
Okay, no, so it's a $20 deluxe edition, which is pretty steep, or $20 extra, I should say.
Okay.
But you get the Doom Slayer, you get the Revenant, that skeleton enemy that fires the rockets at you. You get some custom Doom themed skateboards and a hoverboard inspired by the Unmaker from Doom 64.
Okay.
And then you get Doom music added to the soundtrack too. It's so rad. And it's just
that's pretty sweet. That might be worth the $20 to be honest with you, right there. You know, I bought the Doom suit in Super Smash Bros. To make a Mii for you, thinking that you guys could all play as my Miis, and I found out it was a terrible realization that is not possible. So I have the Doom Slayer costume in Smash now.
Unfortunately not.
Wow.
And unfortunately, it's also one of the costumes that doesn't come with the music, so you don't get that either. But I will say, like, for a Mii costume, it's a pretty sick looking costume.
It's a wicked costume, yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Mapping Metroid returns today, and we're going to be going back to a game that hasn't gotten a ton of Mapping Metroid entries on our list. In fact, there's only been one, and that's been Skytown. So we are going back to Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, which was played in long form at our Omega Metroid Marathon by our pal Griff. And Doom and I kind of did some commentary, but on opposite ends of the game. And what we're going to cover today is kind of two areas in one. We are going to cover the G.F.S. Olympus as well as the planet Norion, because they're kind of one and the same thing. The Olympus basically sits on Norion the entire time. So, you know how this goes. We're going to talk about some of the enemies. We're going to talk about some of the rooms. We're going to talk about some of the expansions, music, bosses, all that kind of good stuff. And since Doom's a little bit fresher, I've asked him if he can kind of lead the charge on this. So I'll tell you what, Doom, let's get it started here, and maybe we could just talk about our first impressions of the area, and then you could kind of take us from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing that always strikes me about Metroid Prime 3 is its opening compared to Primes 1 and 2. Because in Prime 1, you start with a simple bar of text, and then it's off to the races. You're landing on this abandoned, creepy space station. Prime 2, get a little bit more text this time, a little bit more of a meaty prologue section, if you will. But then it's immediately off to the races, and once again you're kind of on your own for the most part. You get some flashback sequences, you interact with Umos, but for the most part, it's kind of your traditional Metroid opening. Prime 3 though is very unique in the series, both for Norion and Olympus as well, in that pretty much right from the get-go, we're introduced to characters and voice acting, and there's this level of interactivity with the rest of the characters that at this point, at least in the Metroid series, was pretty unprecedented at the time. And we really go into this full front and center the second we start this game, even before we land on the ship, because there's also that portion where you're interacting with the ship and doing the motion gimmicks and talking to that one trooper that's kind of guiding you through the whole thing. But yeah, this whole kind of thing is just kind of introduce you to this more I don't know, what's this lifelike, less isolationist approach to Metroid, which eventually we'll get back to that as we get into the main adventure. But yeah, for this tutorial section, it really introduces you to that right from the get-go. And a lot of people don't like that about Prime 3, which I understand, but that's actually kind of why I love Prime 3, is just because of how un-Metroid it is, if you will, and yet still being able to fit within these Metroid constraints despite that. I really like the unique approach to that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's the third game in the sub-series here, so I do kind of feel like you have to do something a little bit different to give it a distinct personality, and Corruption does that. The opening, it's pretty easy to draw comparisons to Halo, I feel like, and those are correct comparisons, but it almost kind of reminds me of a James Bond movie, actually, where you have your big action sequence, you have the great boss fight, which we'll talk about, and then the climactic encounter with Dark Samus. But you really do get to meet a lot of characters along the way, and immediately you can tell this is going to be a different type of Metroid game, because literally you've almost never seen so many characters in a Metroid game, save for maybe Metroid Prime Hunters, and certainly that wasn't presented in the same way. So it was really refreshing, I guess is the word. Very kind of off not off-putting, but like started you off kind of unsettled in a way, which is kind of like how the best Metroid games start. They kind of like to have the ground beneath you a little bit shaken, so to speak. So I remember thinking that it was really cool that you had this like awesome kind of James Bond, intro that really kind of set up the rest of the game and set up, I mean, really the crux of the whole story for the game with the PED suit. So I actually quite like the intro, and obviously that ties pretty heavily to Olympus and to Norion.
Absolutely. And like it gets you fighting with the squad for the first time too. Like once the actual pirate attack begins, like there's multiple rooms where there's some fairly fragile Federation Marines that you gotta shoot a little faster than, so that they don't meet their unfairly NPC demise. And even a couple troopers you can save and get some credits out of it too, which is also pretty awesome. And then you can talk to them after you save them. They'll be like, "Oh my gosh, Samus, thank you for saving my life. I owe you one. By the way, go this way to proceed forward," or whatever. And so I also thought like stuff like that's like really cool world building elements too.
I feel like it just adds to the atmosphere as well, because like so much of what you do in Metroid has like these intergalactic consequences, but you don't necessarily see that, right? Like you're told that the Metroids are this huge threat. You're told that the space pirates are this huge threat, but now you're finally seeing like a conflict on a massive scale between yourself, the pirates, the Federation. So it's really kind of a cool moment that finally shows instead of tells necessarily. So I think it was a great way to start off the game, and a great sequence, and just a really good way to give Metroid Prime 3 its own very distinct identity that immediately separates it from Echoes and from Prime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the most part, the voice work is actually pretty solid in this game. There's definitely a couple of awkward line deliveries, some awkward dialogue here and there. Of course, you have some moments where like a character is speaking directly at Samus and she doesn't say anything back, and it's a bit weird, but I feel like those are more the exceptions than the rule more often than not. I feel like for the most part, it's fairly good to reasonable, I think. You even got a few really cool choices in there. Of course, you got Vegeta himself, Chris Sabat, playing Rendus. We got a little cameo from Troy Baker talking about the Horus Rebellion with another trooper, which is pretty funny in hindsight with how big he's gotten since then.
Yeah, I think the voice acting is fine. Like, the people that you want to be good are all good, right? Like Andreda, Runda, Score, like those guys are all great. Even like the Aurora units, I think sound great, and of course, Admiral Dane. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly some of those awkward. It kind of like it charms me because it reminds me of like the rare games, like Perfect Dark or whatever, when you just run up to an NPC and they're like, they have the weirdest, most awkward dialogue, and it's like this one line. It's just like, oh, okay, like whatever. But I think that like for the first real foray into that voice acting experience, at least for Metroid, I had no issues with it.
I would say for Nintendo in general, not just Metroid, that isn't really something they engage with even that much then. Because, I mean, this was before Zelda, really had the full-fledged voice acting as well. This was still when those games were just kind of like text bubbles and like kind of little sounds every other bubble or so. So yeah, for
a few games on like the GameCube era, like Nintendo games that had voice acting, but it was certainly like the exception, rather than the rule.
Yeah, I guess Mario Sunshine had voice acting, and that was kind of notoriously panned.
Well,
but
I was thinking more like Star Fox Adventures, Eternal Darkness, like those kind of games. Which like, is true, I thought that those games were good. I think even F-Zero GX had some voice acting in it, if I'm not mistaken.
That is true. Yeah, but I mean Star Fox 64 if you want. Yeah, Star Fox 64 if you want to go back even further, actually. And so,
yeah, true. Do a barrel roll.
Yeah. But yeah, let's actually get into the mapping section of this process now that we've kind of gotten our thoughts of like kind of the intro sequence.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's start with the very first room we quite literally land in, and that is Docking Bay 5. This is a pretty significant room. It's literally, our first introduction to this kind of new feel of Metroid Prime 3. Later on, we'll kind of go full circle and fight our first mini boss in the Berserker Lord here, which I think is a pretty cool little intro boss fight to get us all warmed up. Of course, we see Samus's ship for the first time, which most people in the community seem to like it. I know when we were doing our gunship ranking, this was my number one choice. And I still stand by that. It's my favorite ship design in the series. Of course, you also have whatchamacallit, the shooting mini game where you can practice shots on like those little pods.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't want to say I've spent hours doing this game, but I've spent way more time than any human should, just kind of at that target practice game, trying to get 20 for the maximum credit payout.
I never did that. I've certainly spent like a couple minutes like shooting the little gimmicks, whatever they are. But for me, like I actually always thought that like the credit was a little bit hokey. Like I didn't love that gimmick in Trilogy or anything. So I was just like, I don't need to do that. But I did kind of appreciate that it was there, because you don't see a lot of stuff like that in Metroid.
It's also like a subtle way to teach you about, at this time, Prime 3 is a substantially different way to play the game as opposed to Prime 1 and 2. And this is like a subtle little mini game to teach you just how to free aim, which is something, I mean, technically you could free aim by manually pressing R, but it was nowhere near as accurate as it was for the Wiimote. And so it was a really cool way to just kind of subtly teach you how to do that and kind of hone your skills at that. It's a shame that you can't come back and do that after you talk to the Aurora unit after you get the PED suit, because after you leave Olympus that time, you can't come back and play that mini game again. But otherwise, I think it's just this cool interactive mini game. It's a subtle teaching experience that's optional as well. That I'm a fan of options, and I just like that it's there.
Yeah. I think it's fun. It's definitely a cool room that has a awesome payoff, as I'm sure we'll get to in just a bit here. But this is and it kind of sets the tone as well, because and a lot of people levy this as a critique against corruption, and I don't necessarily, but it's different too, in that this is a fairly straight path, and like everything you do really here is a fairly straight path. So it kind of is also just like your very first point of entry going in and going out. So it's certainly an important place on the Olympus.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also that shot right after, or actually no, before you collect the missile launcher, technically, where you're going back to that room. Rather than so you'll see both of the bay doors open. You can see an image of the ship, but it's just quite literally that. It's an image of the ship. It's not so noticeable on the original Wii when you're playing it on 4DP, but when you're playing it using other methods, shall we say, the image becomes quite more obvious, and that kind of illusion is a little bit broken when you're playing at higher resolutions, as it is indeed a PNG, which it makes sense, because you can't the Metroid Prime rooms can only be loaded 2 at a time, so when you have 2 sets of rooms open like that, they had to think of a little shortcut to do that. I definitely think at the time in 2007 it made sense, but just a cool little Easter egg, I think.
Would you be surprised to know that I never noticed?
Not at all. Again, it's something. I'll be honest. Even I didn't notice until another YouTuber pointed it out in their review, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that is like a little PNG image instead of like an actual wide shot." That's interesting.
I feel like that's kind of neat. I feel like that's just like a cool little Easter egg to have.
Yeah. And then after Docking Bay 5, we go to Docking Bay Access. This is where we repair our lifts using our charge beam. Maybe a bit of an overkill way to repair a machine. It's like, hey, we're gonna shoot at it with one of our most powerful weapons. That'll fix it. But again, just a fun little way to teach you how to use the charge beam. Again, you got our Troy Baker cameo talk about the Horus Rebellion. I love these little side Federation conversations that you can listen to throughout, because there's some people that you can talk to, some people that will be like, oh, I'm busy, I don't got time, but then you also just kind of have these conversations that are happening that you can just walk into and overhear, and they're taking place all over the ship, and you don't have to stop and listen, but there's these little world building moments. Sometimes you have stuff like the Horus Rebellion that has absolutely nothing to do with Prime 3. Sometimes you'll see and hear other stuff that is a bit more relevant to the plot and stuff that is going. And so I really like little details like that.
It certainly kind of leaves you wanting for, like, man, side quests would be cool. Like, maybe there's something that we could take this to the next level with, something that we could get rewarded for. That's kind of my thinking whenever I kind of drop in on those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh, I want to learn more about that. I want to contribute to this conversation, but in a physical way with my weapons active,
with my beams, and I want to get a nice missile expansion or something cool for helping someone out doing something.
Well, maybe not a missile expansion. We got enough of those, but
I feel like maybe it beats like just finding it somewhere on the map. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's something cool like a beam combo or something like that. But
there you go.
Something like that. Like I think, and that's a separate conversation. But side quests, this game really just showed like I think side quests in Metroid can work.
Absolutely. And then the next room that stood out to me, and by all means, like, if there's more that you want to talk about a room, like, please let me know.
I'll jump in once you're kind of finished with yours. I think a lot of ours are going to be pretty similar, but you go ahead.
Yeah. The next room I want to talk about is the security station, and I like this room for a few different reasons. So for those who don't remember, this is the room where you have to go to the terminal to find the keypad, and then you have to enter this keypad at the door to unlock it to proceed to the elevator lift. And that's, again, this is a kind of another like little motion gimmick that the game is teaching you, something that will come into play at various other points during the game. But one thing I really like about this room is it introduces a new storytelling device that we don't really see used again throughout the game. But, whereas typically we get our cutscenes and our logbook entries to kind of tell us lore, this is one of the few instances in Metroid where we actually have optional audio logs that we don't necessarily collect, but we can access them kind of hidden away in that same computer terminal where you get those codes. If you, when your hand is up, you can actually use your finger to tap other icons that are on the monitor, and it'll actually swap to those icons, and you'll get the Aurora unit playing a little audio log to kind of tell you about various important aspects of the story, whether it's the PED suit, whether it's the Olympus itself, Planet Norion, the Valhalla incident, various stuff that's, going to be coming into play later in the main story. And it's something that most players probably completely missed. I kind of love that it's just kind of hidden and out of the way, and it's just kind of there for you if you just kind of happen to explore and just be like, hey, what happens if I tap this random PNG icon? Oh, it's probably just a background asset. And it's like, no, it's actually this fully interactable thing, and there's like a ton of juicy details for you to gain off that.
Yeah, I think it's cool too. I would actually love for like future games again to kind of have this kind of implementation, but like everywhere in the world, almost as a replacement for like pirate data or chose a lore or whatever have you. Like I think that's a really cool kind of concept to like find these logs and have like a voice. I feel like it feels like a little bit more personal to have it just come out via sound. So I quite like that as well. That's a good call out too, because I probably would have forgot about that if you didn't mention it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's also, so you know what, those audio logs, now that I think about it, those were also repurposed for the Metroid Prime 3 preview channel as well, which I think is really interesting, because that's something that we'll talk about in the future. But I definitely have a lot of mixed feelings about that Prime 3 preview. But they repurposed a lot of those audio logs, and they contextually made it make sense in the game, but the preview kind of painted a different story in a couple of avenues. But that's a conversation for another time.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yes, I know there's one in particular that you're still peeved about, and
yes.
I'm kind of with you there to an extent. One other thing I love about the security station, there's this window where you can actually see outside into another room that you'll be visiting later, and that's the repair bay. And so that's this cool little foreshadowing of a room that you're going to be visiting later. You can actually see some of the ships being worked on. You can see some of them docked up. You can actually you can scan them too and check on their repair status and how long they've been in service. Again, just some really juicy lore details that Retro did not have to put in there, but they did for people that are insane like me and will scan literally the tiniest blades of grass if they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that room, but I mean, I pretty much think like the whole ship is cool, to be honest. I might be skipping over a few, but I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the flag bridge. Like that's, I'm sure that I know that was on your list, but I'm just antsy and I want to talk about it now. I remember being just like, wow, when I saw this room for the first time, just because again, it's like you've kind of hinted at something like this in Metroid before, but like it's finally like an actual living, breathing ship with staff, with people on it, and it felt like very real, and it was very cool and very memorable for me to see kind of like everything like realized like that. So this one stuck out to me big time in the ship, and I love coming back here whenever I go back onto the G.F.S. Olympus. I know we were going to talk about it, but man, I wanted to talk about it now because that's got to be like one of the cool. I actually think it's one of the coolest parts of the game for me because I just remember like when I first got there, and again the whole first impression of the James Bond movie, it was like, wow, like this feels like an expansion of the Metroid universe.
Absolutely. And I was just talking about like, how you can overhear conversations as you're walking by the Federation Marines. This whole room has so much conversation fully, and I just absolutely love it. Like, and it's all, and not only are you hearing conversations, you're also hearing radio chatter of people responding back to the people in the chairs too. And so it really does feel like this alive environment, and that whole atmosphere of just like, like naval starships communicating to each other and just, picking up little bits and pieces of their conversation and stuff like that. There's something about that I just absolutely love. I love the whole sound design of this room in general, just the people talking, which I know sounds weird, but I don't know. It sounds right.
It makes like a lived in, like actual functioning ship, even if it's just like kind of background chatter. Like that's what I was so impressed at when I saw this room. I was like, wow, like this is an actual ship. Like there's actual staff, there's people. It feels very authentic.
Yeah, it's really cool. I definitely agree. This is one of the coolest rooms, and like I think the whole ship, in my opinion, just because of like all of that. Just because, like, obviously the design of everything is cool too, and of course you get that big wide shot where you can see all the other fleet ships kind of regrouping together. But then just all of that chatter and the audio design and that whole ambiance that room creates. I just inject that into my veins right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was just like so cool, so cool.
Yeah. And then we have a couple of rooms, important rooms that spin off from here. We have the ready room, which is, kind of where our main exposition is delivered to us. We really get to meet the other three bounty hunters for the first time. We do get a little brief thing with Gore, on our way through the quarantine bay, but this is where we really get to meet the hunters. We get to learn more about their personalities, their traits. Of course, we have Gandreda playing a little prank on everyone, trying to copy us, trying to copy our style. Of course, we're introduced to the Chadmiral himself, the MVP, the GOAT. The room itself, not too much going on in the room, but definitely, it's definitely the characters that make this room stand out.
Yeah, totally. I think it's like, it's just like so cool to finally see like other characters you can actually interact with and see that there is people that exist in this universe. Again, like I feel like the Olympus, like if I can boil it down in its simplest form for me, was like I mean, like the rooms are very cool, but it's a pretty straightforward, like it's kind of like the same idea as the Frigate Orpheon, right? But like it does such a good job of just like making the world feel lived and authentic and real. And I think that's the best thing that the Olympus does.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like it does it in like this really unique context that we don't typically get from Metroid games. And that to me is what really makes it so special. Because I feel like, and you know me, Andy, I love Frigate Orpheon. Maybe more than I should, but I adore Frigate Orpheon.
I do know that. I hear about it every time you're on the Patreon show.
That being said, though, I think if Prime 3 was just another Frigate Orpheon, I still would have enjoyed it, but I don't think it would have quite had that same level of impact, especially because, the wrecked ship is quite literally a trope that we've seen, done several times already in Metroid, starting with literally the wrecked ship in Super Metroid.
Very on the
and so
nose.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't think having another one would have been as impactful. So just another thing that I think in the long run, maybe on the surface it doesn't seem very Metroidy, but like I'm really glad that they ended up going this direction because it's just another thing that makes corruption stand out. And I mean, to me, like again, it's one of my favorite aspects of the game in general.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right with you. Like it's nice to do something a little bit different, and I think at this point, like when you're on the third game of a trilogy, you got to do something a little bit different to give each game its own unique kind of personality, and I think they like, and some Metroid fans don't love it, and I get it, as you said, but like I do think it's important to have the games feature their own kind of identity. And I think the Olympus really sets the tone for the rest of Corruption, letting you know that like, this is kind of going to be similar to your other Metroid adventures, but in a way it's going to be kind of different too. Which, again, like I think by the point that we're at 2007, and especially because we've had, I shouldn't say so many, but I mean like there have been 3 other Metroid Prime games released in the 5 years before, like. I do think it's important to give it its own unique flavor. So that's I think that's the best thing that the Olympus does, and then obviously that kind of bleeds into Norion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't even say kind of. I think it absolutely bleeds into Norion too, which we'll probably get into in just a few moments. There are a couple more rooms that I did want to talk about first, though. So technically, it's going to be a hot minute before we revisit this area, but we're just going to skip over since it's in close proximity. But the Aurora Chamber, I'm going to also include the Aurora Access because it's really a glorified loading zone, but my God, is it a cool glorified loading zone. I love this. I don't know what it is about like what is it? Diagonal shafts in Metroid games. Again, like calling back to the Frigate Orpheon, but I don't know. I really love diagonal shafts, and this is like one of the largest one we've seen. There's like this. Again, you get more like chatter in the background, kind of because it's it's a very priority access chamber. Like you have to have high level credentials to access it or permission from the Aurora unit itself. And so as you're going up the elevator, you can hear like an intercom, like verifying, your identity and your credentials. You can hear like the officer at the top reconfirming that. And again, like I'm a sucker for really good conversational foley. And again, this room just is another one that sticks out to me in that regards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about this one, but I do remember thinking like it is pretty cool to go through. You're right though. For me, it's just like the step to get to like where you want to go.
Absolutely, yeah. And then and I just love the design of the Aurora Chamber in general. I love how I love how
awesome.
I love how how massive and imposing the room is. Like they really give you the sense of scale of just how large and powerful these Aurora units are. Just how much is required to actually like power them up and like what goes into maintaining them. And they really didn't have to go all out in just designing the room to evoke that, but they did.
This room is awesome. Like, and I would say like every Aurora unit is awesome to an extent, but I probably think this room is the most awesome, and the reason why is because like it's your first impression, so like you got to do it right, and the way like that hulking Aurora unit, it's obvious similarities to another enemy in this franchise. You're right actually, like the presentation going up to it, I think is really really cool. It's a really impressive room, and it really kind of just, I think it gets across like the gravitas of how critical these Aurora units are to the modern day Galactic Federation, which also kind of sets up one of the twists later in the game, how important it is when one of them goes rogue or goes missing. So it does a good job in a couple different fronts, like setting up the importance of it, setting up the grandeur of the Aurora units, and then kind of detailing like, hey, what will happen if this falls into the wrong hands. So I think it's pretty effective room.
Yeah, it's a really cool room, and again, kind of a blink and you miss it kind of thing, because you're in that room for that kind of sequence where the Aurora gives you the story details at that point in the game, and then technically you never revisit that game. You kind of do on the Valhalla, because there's a similar Aurora chamber in that in a very different context, which I guess kind of goes back to what you were saying about what if these were repurposed for nefarious reasons? I guess that does kind of go back and recontextualize that. But yeah, this specific Aurora chamber you will only visit that one time, and I think it makes it that much more special in a way.
Yeah, I agree.
The final room I want to talk about, I don't even know if calling this a room is the right word. I guess technically it's a room, but it's more of an alcove. But the the disposal chamber, there's something about this sequence that I've always just loved. So this is after the Xeno Research Lab, where you're doing the little space pirate game trying to get the energy cell back, and then those crawl tanks come out and you have to go underneath the floor. Well, eventually you go into the disposal chamber, where like all of this waste and garbage is, and you have to activate a bomb slot that will actually activate a door and jettison you into outer space. And as someone who's always wanted zero G combat and exploration in a Metroid game, this is probably the closest we've gotten to that, where we can actually see Samus, actually in outer space, not being affected by gravity. And for that, I've always really enjoyed this cutscene. Hopefully in a future Metroid game, we can experience that in actual gameplay, though, because that's what I really want.
Hey, you get a nice energy tank along the way. That's my contribution here. I think like the whole sequence actually is just like really cool when the pirates are attacking and you kind of like see the ship falling apart. I feel like that whole like from beginning to end sequence is just really kind of, again, very neat and adds to the bondness of that opening. So you've not really started off hot like that in a Metroid game. Like you kind of have the frigate Orpheon, but even then that's like, not. It's pretty isolated, pretty like the damage has already been done. This one you've just got like stuff blowing up everywhere, which I think like really again adds to the intensity, adds to the ambiance.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you'll be seeing stuff blown up. There's those pirate boarding cruisers that will like destroy sections of the wall, and you can actually enter those cruisers after you've defeated the pirates, because like it creates like a whole new section of the room after it does that, which I think is a pretty wicked detail there. You'll have some hallways and stuff getting closed off if like a ship crashes into it, and the emergency override will activate and block access. Like it's very like there's a lot of scripted events going on that like makes the area feel very dynamic. It's actually something that I really liked about Metroid Fusion's areas in particular, and something we never really saw in the Prime games up to this point, where you're starting to see the areas kind of evolve and change. Granted, it's a little bit more of a scripted piece. It's not so much an area that you revisit like in Fusion, but still, I think it's really solid here for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think like the whole thing is just like a really cool intro and really good tone setter.
Absolutely. And then that pretty much covers all the rooms that I want to talk about with the Olympus. So why don't we swap over to Planet Norion.
Planet Norion, an underrated planet that you really don't get to see a whole lot of, unfortunately. It's basically just like the Federation base on Planet Norion. Although, again, it's pretty cool because like there's definitely that sense of urgency, that sense of catastrophe that is going on when you land on the planet. Norion, for me, like the rooms are okay. It's more like the set pieces and like the sequences that stick out beyond the actual rooms themselves. Although like I think like both generator rooms are pretty like cool the way that the layout is. Those ones do impress me just with the way visually that it just looks. And I do kind of like the addition of it probably sounds dumb, but like some of the cargo docks, for example, like that, you kind of get that nice little blend of like inside but outside, which it maybe sounds like a little lame, but it's kind of nice to be able to have that in a Metroid game, because like oftentimes you're kind of in dark caves or whatever, or you're in space, and now it's just kind of like you got like a nice vista, that you could look at, which I always appreciate, but you still have the option to like get out of there. So those ones stuck out for me, and I think it's Cargo Dock 2 that has the Metroid like horde on it as well, which I think is like neat, like a neat little thing to overcome, or maybe it's the Beatles or something along those lines. But like right before you get to the Hatcher Metroid, that one sticks out to me. I can't say.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's Cargo Dock B.
Cargo Dock B. Okay. I don't know if I can say that like a bunch of the rooms stick out to me in particular. Although there is that one pretty cool room. Pretty sure it's just the cargo hub, which is kind of like a multi-tiered like. It almost looks like that Splatoon stage in Smash Bros. Actually, where it's like the multi-tiered with diagonal platforms and stuff. That's kind of a cool room, but I think for me, like it's like I said, it's not like the room's layout specifically, but like specifically like what's happening around you that makes Norion stand out to me, particularly obviously the opening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely about the set pieces for the most part in this game. I also wouldn't say there's particular rooms that stand out to me, but there's a lot of really cool details and moving parts that I really like in very specific rooms. So like, I'm trying to find it on the map here. It's either, I think it's Substation East, I think is the room that I'm thinking of right here, where you go in, you go in there. Or no, it can't be that room because here it is. It's the maintenance station. That's what I was looking for. The maintenance station. Underneath the floor panels, there's like all these moving gizmos and gears, and unfortunately, you actually can't scan these and learn more about these. But like, I've talked about this on various other episodes of the podcast before. But like, I am such a sucker for areas that have like random moving parts and details. It's one of the reasons why I adore Sanctuary Fortress so much, and why I got a new lease of life on the Pirate Homeworld later in Prime 3. But I love like futuristic moving parts and details and gizmos and stuff like that. And while there's not a ton in the area, when they are in the area, like they really stand out and they look cool. There's also that one room where you're forced to collect the energy tank in morph ball mode, kind of like in the opening sequence. Actually, another morph ball energy tank there, but you collect that, and you're trying not to fall onto those hot panels that will damage you. Yeah. If you look to your left, there's like another turbine generator that's like absolutely whirring, and you can actually, if you scan it, you'll see that it's actually sustained damage from the assault, and that's what's caused the platforms to overheat as well, which again, really cool world building lore detail, because they didn't have to explain away anything like that at all.
Yeah, and that's I guess like we typically bring it up later too, but we might as well just bring it up now. Like the other thing too is like there's not like a ton in terms of expansions for Norion. Very, very limited, and I don't believe that energy tank aside, I don't know if there's a whole lot of missile expansions at all on the Olympus. Maybe just your first missile launcher, but
what? I was just gonna say there is one pretty important item you do collect at the beginning. Before I do that though, the name of the room that I was thinking of is Substation East. That is the name of that energy tank room. But yeah, literally within Docking Hub Alpha, where you first land, we get the grapple lasso, which becomes a very important item in this game, and one that I frankly hopes returns in a future Metroid game, even if it's not Metroid Prime 4. We'll have to see about that, but this might be my favorite item in Metroid Prime 3, at least of the new items introduced. I love the grapple lasso. I don't know what to say. I love the waggle, love the motion gimmicks in this game, love interacting with it, especially in combat scenarios. And there's something that will never get old for me of just tearing a space pirate shield right from their hands. I cannot get enough of it. I know you and I differ on this, but I am a very big grapple lasso enjoyer.
Well, and to finish my thought, like in terms of like actual expansions, like not like items that you're gonna get, like it's not the most populated area. Like there's not a ton of expansions. I was about to say, like I think that energy tank that you were talking about in Substation East, it's probably about the coolest expansion that might be available on Norion, except for like maybe the one missile expansion where you got to jump on the platform behind your ship. I think you got to grapple there actually, but
right.
Yeah, you know what? Like the grapple lasso is okay. I don't mind it. I wasn't in love, and I shouldn't. I'll clarify. Like I don't dislike it, but I wasn't in love either with like the waggling and like I just want to sit on my fat butt and play video games. I don't have to move my hand or you know what I mean. Like use motion controls if I don't want to. If it was just a button, I mean that's a different story. Like that, I like that idea, but the way it was implemented, and I get it. Like that was the Wii. Every game kind of had a little gimmick like that. But yeah, I mean it's certainly an important part of the game for sure. And you know what, there is some satisfaction in ripping off stuff. And to the game's credit, they do use it consistently a lot with I mean basically every enemy that you fight in the game, or a lot of the important enemies anyways. So yeah, you can't say it's not an important item that you get, but I also couldn't lie to you and say that I'm like absolutely in love with it either.
Yeah, well, and you know what? Totally understandable. You know, especially, you know, a lot of people actually don't like the motion gimmicks in Prime 3, so I totally understand why it might not be everyone's cup of tea. Hey, you know what? Maybe if this game gets ported to Switch, maybe we'll get a grapple lasso that does appeal to more people in that regards. But
maybe we will. That'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, as for myself, big old grapple lasso fan in the house. As for the other expansions, there's not too many. So there is a missile expansion that you can get in the cargo hub during this intro sequence. You have to bomb a panel, and then while you're going through the maze, one of the Jolly Roger drones will try to shoot at you as you're navigating the maze. You can collect that. Otherwise, I think all the other missile expansions we have to come during the return trip well after the intro sequence. We got an ice missile door at the maintenance station. There's
a bunch of different stuff here, but
there's a missile expansion at Substation West. There's one that we need to use the spider ball to get in Cargo Deck A. And then of course there's the energy cell that we get from the Metroid Hatcher, and I believe that is all in terms of our expansions. But why don't I think we've been putting it off for too long. Why don't we get to
let's do it.
Let's get to the real meat and potatoes of this area. So actually, first off, so we do get a little encounter with Rundus at Cargo
the
Dock
Metroid
A.
Hatcher boss fight. Yeah.
That's the boss fight everyone was waiting for us to talk about. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, we got to start off with the Berserker Lord actually, because I wanted to say something there.
We can throw it back to Olympus.
Go ahead. Earlier. I don't have much to add for the Berserker Lord. I think it's a fine mini boss, but we can't disrespect the Berserker Lord without just talking about how awesome the death scene of the Berserker Lord is. This is so great when he just gets like blasted into space. It's so awesome.
I love how over the top it is. I always refer to it as like a Dick Van Dyke style kind of gag, where it's just like everything that could possibly go wrong for him just keeps going wrong. Like first he gets electrocuted, and then he falls into space, and then the ship crashes. It's just like this domino effect of just all this awful things happening. And like there's this kind of dark comedy aspect of it, and the Metroid Prime games kind of toy with like dark comedy with the logbook entries when it comes to the space pirates. Some of the ragdoll physics kind of play into that as well, but we don't really see that in cutscenes until now, and I always just get an absolute kick out of this poor pirate just stumbling into like the worst possible scenario possible just over and over again.
This reminds me of whatever James Bond movie that Dave Bautista was in, where they kick him out of the train, and he looks down, and he speaks his first word ever, and he's like, "Oh crap, that's not what he said."
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say he doesn't say that.
The Berserker Lord just going out is a great moment. It's just it's a fun little moment of levity, which frankly you need in everything that's going on here. And yeah, so I wanted to shout out the Berserker Lord, and we should shout out the Metroid Hatcher just like super quickly as well, because it's an optional little mini boss, and depending on where you are in the game, maybe you fought some Metroid Hatchers, maybe you haven't, maybe you have the X-ray scope, maybe you don't. If you don't, I think it's actually kind of like a fun like little mini boss fight. If you do,
I was gonna say I always have the X-ray visor going into this fight. I will not go without it.
I like to do it without the sometimes when I'm playing Super Metroid, I'll just fight Dragon the regular way. You know what I mean? Just cause. And the same thing with the Metroid Hatcher. If I'm not feeling it, I'll come back with my X-ray visor. But it's a fun little encounter, and I think the game does kind of like a cool little job of building up for that with the with all those like little I cannot remember what they are, like little phazon beetles or whatever the heck it is in Generator B access, or Cargo Dock B. But it kind of builds up, saying that like there's something not quite right in this room, and you don't get to access it till very late. So I kind of like this little encounter as well, and you get an energy cell out of it.
It's a cool little bonus section. Obviously, nowhere near as like action packed as that intro, but you know, you get some little sequences. You alluded to it earlier. You have that Metroid Hopper swarm that attacks you at Cargo Dock B.
Yes.
Yeah, which has some design similarities to Metroid Prime 2, so that's a cool little bit of connective tissue there, kind of hinting at that lineage there. But yeah, before we get into the real meat and potatoes in this area, I did want to talk about us meeting Rundus at Cargo Dock A. I remember seeing, this was like one of the, so the Norion sequence, this was actually like the first bit of Metroid Prime 3 gameplay that Nintendo showed off when like the actual gameplay was revealed at E3 2006, because the game was revealed the prior year, but you know, we got the actual gameplay in 2006. We got the subtitle Corruption added on there. And this Norion we had a streamlined version of this for the demo, but yeah, we saw the Norion sequence, and they showed off this Rundus cutscene as well, where he's quite literally icing these pirates, quite literally.
It's very cool.
It was before Chris Sabat has taken on his voice talent for this, so they had they had some other kind of beta voice used in the process, but yeah, kind of our first introduction to Rundus, just literally talking to us one-on-one. Most of the other characters beforehand were just kind of walking into conversations. They're not really talking to us, but Rundus is the first instance where we actually like really have a character. Like, I guess technically, we have Admiral Dane talking a little bit directly to us in the intro, but like Rundus is like it's a bit more. It's a bit more of a meaty conversation that Rundus is having. I don't even know if conversation is the right word. It's more like a one-way conversation, but still like it's one of the hunters talking in depth to us, and he's introducing the command visor to us as well, which will also become very important through our adventure. And so that's all a sequence that stand out to me. Let's quit dilly-dallying any longer though. Meta freaking Ridley.
One of the best Ridley fights in the series.
My God, this fight is incredible, and there's so much leading up to it. So you actually come back to Cargo Dock A after we're introduced to the PED troopers and kind of how powerful they are. A little preview of our own PED technology, and then right as you finish talking with him and you walk off, boom, you have Ridley go over, you have the trooper go, "What the heck is that?" Yeah. Which I always get a laugh out of that line delivery in particular. That there's something about the way he says that just always makes me laugh. But yeah, you see Ridley, you can see him using his plasma breath on one of the buildings on the outside, and it's like, man, even from a distance, Ridley just looks absolutely gnarly. And then there's that little mini game where you're in the morph ball tunnels and you have to avoid him trying to chomp down on you, and you got to bomb his hands so that he can let you through. I always thought that was a cool sequence.
Underrated part of this fight, actually, because it really is like you feel like you have nowhere to go. You feel very helpless because like you're a ball. What are you gonna do? And Meta Ridley is right there over top of you. Obviously there's a couple Lord of the Rings comparables here when the fight itself starts, but this reminds me of like when the hobbits are hiding in that little nook under the tree when the ring wraith is looking for them. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool. I love this sequence. I agree it doesn't get brought up nearly enough. But yeah, I always love that little that little intro to the boss fight. And then of course you got the Meta Ridley fight itself, which prior to replaying Metroid Prime 3, I probably would have said Samus Returns is my all-time favorite Ridley fight. And it's a damn good one. We, obviously my opinions on it actually appearing in Samus Returns, but as a boss fight, man, that Ridley fight in Samus Returns is awesome. I think I might slightly prefer the Prime 3 fight, even though it's definitely very, very easy, being like one of the first fights in the game. Like the spectacle of the fight for me really kind of takes precedent over that. And, even though the fight is pretty easy, just, being a part of that whole thing, just seeing like the walls just rapidly running by you guys as you're falling to your demise, seeing Ridley's hands and claws, just absolutely shredding the sides of the shaft and all the sparks that are flying. Like it is such a killer fight, and I literally never get tired of it each time.
I mean, it's an amazing fight, and again, different, right? Like you fought Ridley so many times at this point, and just coming off the what many people would say is their favorite Ridley fight in Metroid Prime. So again, it was a way to do that same fight but differently, and clearly this was inspired by Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, with the great Balrog Gandalf fight. Like, just such an awesome presentation, and it adds stakes, it adds urgency, because you're literally free falling. You got to be pretty specific with your attacks as well. Like there's multiple times when Ridley is kind of like loading up his attack, and you got to shoot him in the right spot, or else you just get crushed. And it's got a little bit of physicality to it as well, which I really like, where like you can like grind against the sides of the shaft and you take damage, and a lot of times I think a little bit of physicality is missing from a lot of important fights like that. So this is for all the reasons you said and more, like I think that this is just an exceptional fight, and really like something different, and something that I kind of wish that we'd see a little bit more of. We're like fighting familiar enemies, but maybe in an unfamiliar setting, or a setting that kind of like adds a degree of unpredictability. Or again, it's almost like Smash Bros. It's almost like a stage hazard when you're fighting. So you not only have to fight the person you're fighting, but you also have to fight your environment. And I think that adds a lot to this fight, and I think that's why everybody thinks so highly of it. And it's not like the Omega Ridley fight later on in the game is bad either, but like this one is just like so memorable that for me, it like completely overshadows that fight, and really just it kind of puts a bow on the amazing intro that this game has. And you know what? It also does a couple other elements as well in terms of story. One, it kind of levels Ridley up a little bit, because without Rundus, you're chopped liver.
Yeah.
And I think that Ridley kind of needs that every now and then. Like you need that, you need your big bad to be a big bad, and like so imposing, so scary that like you need an assist in order to not even beat him, but like just survive him. So I think that it was a good job in kind of establishing that for Ridley, and I think it was a good job in establishing Rundus as well. Like you've kind of had like some of the smarmy one-liners and stuff like that before, but now you're really seeing that like this bounty hunter is a credible bounty hunter, and he has skills that are unique to him, and he can contribute in ways that Samus cannot. And I think that makes what happens later ultimately mean a little bit more.
Yeah, it's the first time in a Metroid game we see Samus being saved by an external figure. Up to this point, she's kind of, in charge of like her own actions. But this is the first time we actually see another character actively, make a difference here. And like if Rundus wasn't there, there'd be no Metroid Prime 4, I'll tell you that.
Not the last time, though. Not the last time. I'm referring to the baby Metroid, by the way. I'm not referring to Metroid Other M.
Yes. I figured, yes.
I just wanted to click, because I thought about that. I was like, wait a second. Yeah. No, I think this is great. This is like probably one of the best fights in the game. It's probably the best fight in the game, actually. I like the Rundus fight is awesome. The Gandrada fight is awesome. To be honest, all the Hunter fights are awesome, but like this one just has such just a unique, fantastic setting that it makes it impossible to forget. So this is an exceptional part of the game, and again takes place in the opening salvo here. So like, what a way to start off the game.
Yeah, it's also really unique in terms of your movement options, because like typically you're not free falling, and so you're going left, right, forward, and backwards. But here, because you're free falling through this shaft, you can still move left and right, but rather than moving forward and backward, now you're moving up and down, and it creates this completely new movement dynamic that still feels really good to control. And then much like the Berserker Lord fight, it's also a subtle little way to teach you how to free aim as well, because you'll have all these moving weak points that you need to like you'll have the general Ridley lock on that'll like lock onto like his chest or his neck, but then you have to use the free aim to like move to different parts, his hand position depending on like where he's going to strike you, his mouth if he opens up, and those won't remain static either. They'll like subtly move as well, so you have to kind of like it teaches you to also lead your shots a little bit, and so it does, even though the fight's easy, it adds this extra level of like urgency again to everything else that's already happening as well, which I really like.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right with you. Like this fight, I mean, we can't say enough about it. And we've talked about it a lot on some of our Ridley rankings, but like this fight is awesome. And it's again just like a real tone setter for the game, and telling you that this game is really about being different. I know I said that a bunch, but that's kind of, I think, like the biggest thing that Corruption was going for, is like, we're going to be different than the other Metroid Prime games.
But that's pretty much the main rooms. I think before we sign off, I think we got to talk about,
one thing we should talk about is the music, I think, as well.
Yeah, the music as well, but in terms of the actual rooms, we should probably also talk about the control tower, because that's, outside of the Ridley fight, probably the other major room in this area, which is funny because there's actually no gameplay that takes place in that area. That entire area takes place in a cutscene.
Mm-hmm. Cool cutscene,
yet it's very, very cool cutscene, very important cutscene. And I mean, it pretty much starts off our main story journey. It gives us our corruption powers that'll lead to the PED suit. It leads to the unfortunate demise of our fellow bounty hunters. It leads to, I guess technically we do see the reintroduction of Dark Samus, but we actually see her in the flesh in this cutscene, reborn with her new design. Just absolutely smoking everybody, which I think is a good setup to just how big of a threat Dark Samus is in this game.
You know what? The exact same thing I was saying about Ridley. It gives Dark Samus a little bit of punch in the game, because I mean, like, you've beaten Dark Samus 3 times already in Echo, so it's kind of like, do I got to fight Dark Samus again in this game? And I think they do a good job of establishing, like, this is a more powerful version of Dark Samus and a more organized version of Dark Samus as well. So it kind of is empowering the villain yet again, and giving, Samus an obstacle to overcome, and putting her kind of behind the 8 ball, so you're rooting for Samus that much more as she is, reacquiring her powers and has this deadly suit that's corrupting her. So it's a really effective cutscene as well. Very very cool, but it does make you think, why the heck didn't Dark Samus just finish off Samus right there and right then? The classic bad guy trope,
Well, I mean, she probably thought Samus was going to suffer the fate as the other hunters. I mean, and she was close, at least from a story sense. I don't know, from a gameplay sense, she didn't really come close, but I mean, from a story sense, theoretically, she was really close.
She was pretty close, yeah. That's just like a common, like, villain thing in all media. It's just like, dude, you gotta finish it while you can here,
Reminds me of I was about to say, we talked a lot about awesome powers during the marathon. That reminds me of Scott complaining to his dad about, he's gonna escape like he does every time. What are you doing?
I'll go get we'll finish him off right now. Maybe Dark Samus should have had Scott with her there. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe she should have had me. I would have been like, what are you doing? Don't go. But nevertheless, it's a great cutscene. Really, and again, like a cinematic cutscene as well, which you've had cinematic cutscenes in Metroid for sure. Like, but I don't think like this. And I think that this was like a next level. Like the whole sequence from beginning to end was like a whole other level above some of the stuff that we've seen in other Metroid games. And I really do think like it added a really, I don't know even what the word I'm looking for is. It added like a big feel to the game. Like it made what you were doing feel like very important and very consequential. So I really, you're right to point out the control tower. Like that's an important part. And I think the PED suit that you get after too, like we've talked about, that's one of my favorite suits in Metroid, and it's cool because it kind of like evolves as the game goes on. So, and that all starts in the control tower, which you never get to visit it again. So enjoy it while it's there.
Yeah, you get to visit the control tower elevator, but yeah, not the tower itself. When I will say, I do like how you get a little bit of time with the bounty hunters in the elevator beforehand. You're all kind of like hyping each other up beforehand. I always do get a kick out of that, and of course we got one of my favorite Rundus lines: "Justice will prevail" and all that stuff, right, Samus?
I never, even now it startles me when Gendrada's just like, "Hey Sammy," or whatever she said.
Oh
It's
yeah.
man, that's I don't know if I'd be calling Samus Sammy. She'd probably shoot my head off, but if I was Gendrada, maybe I would. I don't know.
Yeah, relax. We're the good guys.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the music. And once again, I feel like you're probably going to have more than me to say about the music. I think the music here is perfectly fine, although it doesn't necessarily stick out to me. Maybe I should have done a bit more listening to it before we recorded, but I think it's like fine for what it is. But the music for me certainly takes a backseat to a lot of like the sounds and the effects and stuff like that going on, because like that to me is like the sound design is what really kind of puts this area over the top with like all like the moving parts, the explosions, the noises that everybody's making. Music itself I feel like is just, it's fine though. Like it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. I think it's perfectly acceptable, perfectly fine. There aren't too many standout tracks in this introductory sequence for me. Probably the best theme is the Meta Ridley theme that's reused during that fight, but otherwise, otherwise it's fine for the most part. But I also think the right move at the same time, because so Prime 3's score introduces a lot more neoclassical elements into its musical composition as a base. To kind of go, and we've been talking about this, to kind of go with that more cinematic feel, that more large, important feeling that you get with Prime 3, that, hey, everything happening here is a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's very action-packed heavy. It's very space opera-esque on a level that Prime 1 and 2 aren't so much. And so I think the music really reflects that change in tone as well. I do kind of wish that some of the recordings were made with live instruments, because I feel like the digital instruments I think really work when Metroid is going for these ethereal and otherworldly sounds, where it's going for that kind of original Hirokazu Tanaka look on kind of how music should be interpreted. Whereas for these more bombastic orchestral segments, I think for the most part they would work better with live instrumentations. Some of those digitized instruments don't really sound that great when listening to them on their own. That being said, though, when you're playing them in game and you're focused on the action, all the foley and the gunfire and all that, it's not a huge deal. It is noticeable if you're looking for it, but not a big deal. But at the same time, like you were alluding to, not a very memorable score for the most part during the intro. I remember it just because, again, I listened to it so much during, those E3 days and watching that Norion demo over and over again. So I have a few of those tracks on lock. But I mean, they're acceptable, they're fine, but nothing really that groundbreaking except for maybe the Meta Ridley theme, which we've already heard.
Yeah, I guess I would say this. Like I'd probably say this for like most of the soundtrack, and this isn't to say that there's not great tracks, there is, but the one area where I think, like, I've been talking this whole podcast about how Metroid Prime 3 made very clear steps to be different than its predecessors. I think they could have taken a step to be a little bit more different in terms of music. I agree with you there, because like maybe not all of it. Like I think obviously like Skytown and Brio and Pirate Hole, like those are great tracks, but maybe there could have been something, I don't know, something a little bit more punch, a little bit more bombastic, a little bit more, particularly for the opening here, just because it's so bombastic, and maybe you don't need that. Maybe that would just overshadow, but yeah, I think that the music is something that maybe wasn't quite different enough in the game from its predecessors.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even say it needed to be more or less different. I might have gone in a slightly different direction. Like, again, for those orchestral segments, I typically prefer Metroid to not focus on orchestral music, but I think in the context of Prime 3 it does make sense to introduce a bit more of those elements. I would have if I was saying like, okay, we're gonna do some orchestral pieces, we're gonna start introducing some orchestral elements into these more traditional Metroid tracks. Mm-hmm. I would like personally fully commit to that bit. It's like, okay, we want to do an orchestral section. Let's get an orchestra, or if we can't get an orchestra, like let's really make these synthesized instruments sound like pretty close to an orchestra, at least to the point where you really cannot tell unless you're listening to it on its own. That's kind of what I would have done. That being said, though, whereas Prime 1 and 2 I think are 5. Yeah. Whereas Prime 1 and 2 are like 5 out of 5s for me. Prime 3 is still a 4 out of 5. I think it's a really solid soundtrack for the most part. There's very few, I'd say, actual duds in the soundtrack. I think at worst, for the most part, it's fine, but it does have its moments of peak where like it really does get good. And I actually think it's not really in any of these areas that we're talking about, but I think the actual Rundus boss fight theme is an example where that neoclassical direction really shines through, and I think is really powerful. I think there's a big reason, or even Skytown, where they really does home in on like those harps and like those church choirs too. We've gotten church choirs in Metroid before, but like a really less of an ethereal sounding church choir, more of a traditional sounding one, in terms of Skytown, and I think it's really effective there. And so there definitely is moments where that soundtrack absolutely shines through, I think.
Yeah, and again, like you said, like I think the soundtrack is perfectly fine as is, and the areas that you want to be good are good. Like the main, the 3 main areas that you're in the most, those are good, and so really that's kind of what matters. But some of the bigger moments, like this opening, or when you storm, the planet phase or the pirate homeworld, it could have done with a little bit more punch, I feel like. But nevertheless. Any final thoughts on the G.F.S. Olympus and Norion here? I think my takeaway is just like it's a really impressive tone setter. Like, yes, you can go back to this area afterwards, but it's almost like better as like just an intro area where you go in and it kind of tells you like this is what corruption is all about, and we're gonna do things differently, and I think it's really cool for that.
I'm really happy that Metroid Prime 4 seems to be taking heavy inspiration from this segment, because I always kind of figured that this would be like a one and done kind of thing. Clearly not if Prime 4, if what we've seen with Prime 4 has anything to say about it. Now, who knows if that's going to be the entirety of Prime 4, which I don't think it is, and I think that's the correct decision to make. I think the main Prime 4 adventure should be a more traditional Metroid experience, but I am glad that we are still getting these like cinematic openers with like, lots of, dynamic characters and backgrounds, moving parts, and just stuff happening. Like, it really does make the scale feel much grander. And I think I agree with you when I don't think that grand scale doesn't have to take away from that feeling of isolation in a Metroid game either. So I'm just really happy to see that Prime 3's influence is still important to this day.
There it is. All right, everybody. Well, that is it for the G.F.S. Olympus and Planet Norion. We hope that you dig this Mapping Metroid episode. Mapping Metroid will, of course, return in the future, and we look forward to that. But we got a whole slew of great shows here coming in the next couple of weeks, including some familiar segments coming back. We got our logbook archives. Maybe I'll save some other surprises here, but we definitely have that coming up. And we, on that note, we're going to get out of here. So thank you everybody for checking us out. Thank you everybody for listening. Of course, we do want to do a little bit of shilling before we get you out of here. So make sure that you check us out wherever you are over on social. We're at Blue Sky, over at Spiteri316, Doomital Cross, and of course at Omega Metroid. Give us a subscription, a like, a review, a rating, all that kind of good stuff wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, if you got a Metroid fan in your life, tell them about this podcast. We're the only Metroid podcast doing a weekly Metroid show. So give us some love, dang it, and tell your friends about us. Tanner, if you're out there, don't forget to DM me about that t-shirt, and we'll get that over to you, and we'll get you repping the Omega Metroid swag right there. The other thing that I'll mention as well is that if you want to really take your Omega Metroid love to the next level, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/spnet, and that will get you a monthly bonus show where we have the Great Metroid Area ranking rolling along where, as the name implies, we are ranking every single area in this Metroid series. So that is there as well. My friends, that is going to do it for us. So thank you everybody one last time for contributing to the success of the Omega Metroid Marathon. Thanks for checking us out, and we will see you back here next week. Till then, everybody, take care.